Leadership and management can be extremely rewarding endeavors, whether it's seeing a program that you've driven grow and succeed, developing and growing a team and seeing them thrive, or helping someone individually to achieve their goals. Guiding growth and development can be extremely fulfilling. Yet, there's no denying that leadership can, at times, feel very isolating. So tonight, I want to talk about that in general and how my own experiences with Flesh and Blood over the last few years have helped to change my perspectives. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, my Flesh and Blood friends. Welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast, and happy Fab Friday. Thanks for checking in for, something a little different. Now, it's been a while since we've done one of these chats, but I do think it's worth spending some time today to really dive into this topic, which I've been thinking quite about over the last about 5-6 months or so, maybe since this summer. So first, what I want to do is, first off, this is a beer chat. So cheers. There's no script tonight. I'm just talking from the heart. I do have some talking points so I don't get too off track and waste too much time. But I really wanted to just, kind of talk about my feelings, and we'll get to where I want to go. All right. So first, what I want to start with the objective of tonight, why we're doing this to begin with. So over the last I think primarily 2-ish years of Flesh and Blood, maybe a little longer than that. But we've really been talking and focusing on community growth and attracting new players and how we develop those new players into staying in the community and stuff like that. Now, like Andrew, the game's almost 5 years old. Why just the last 2 years? The real answer is that Flesh and Blood was growing on its own accord, right? It was doing its own thing. People were coming in because they wanted to make money. They blah, 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 right? Whatever reason they came in, it was gaining momentum. But, it was about 2 years ago-ish, maybe not quite that long, but you understand what I'm saying. We kind of hit that inflection point, and it was, the boom was over, right, I think is a good way to say it. And instead, it was going to be up to us collectively as the Flesh and Blood community to grow our communities, to get new people, to retain those people, and really grow them in to be part of our community to where it would help get the ball rolling, right? Whatever metaphor you want to use, right? So in that, the objective of tonight is I understand by my own background, and not just in Flesh and Blood, but my whole life, much of my life, I should say, how hard it can be to be a leader or step up within some team that you're a part of or within your community in this example. So what I wanted to do was kind of talk to folks who maybe are leading and struggling, maybe are on the fence and considering stepping up or not, or something like that. Now, the scope of tonight's discussion obviously goes far beyond just Flesh and Blood or even gaming. It goes into our lives, our careers, and actually I noticed it even in family dynamics, right, with my wife and my son, and how I'd become a leader within the family, and sometimes that meant not being with them in the same capacity as, you might want to be or think about it, right? So and then you're like, well, Andrew, why are we talking about this on Flesh and Blood channel? And that's a fair question. But the answer is because, again, the objective, I want to talk to potential leaders within the community. And also it's because my experiences in the last about year, right? Actually, we're closing in on almost exactly a year in terms of my Flesh and Blood program leadership, where I do it at Kassai Games, has really allowed me to hit the highs and the lows. And some things I've seen over the last year personally have really helped me to change my perspectives. So I thought that by maybe offering some stories and some experiences and some perspectives might help people out there to find their way or to keep doing what they're doing or whatever it is. Okay. So first off, what do I mean by the loneliness of leadership? Okay. The loneliness of leadership, whether it's people management directly, like through work or something like that, or whether it's being a leader of a program like at Kassai or something like that, it can at times be a very isolating experience, right? And I think that in of itself puts up a barrier that either sometimes leads people to back away from the role, right? Once they're in it, they're like, this is not for me, like this isn't fun. Or it's something that makes them hesitate in taking on more responsibility or stepping up in the role to begin with. Okay. Now, I've been leading and managing in various capacities since the age of 17. I was my cross-country team captain, where, that's a leadership type role where I'm not necessarily managing people directly, like their performance is not based on my decisions, but I'm guiding and trying to keep people who may have competing objectives or desires or whatever in the moment and trying to keep them on track, right? So, and I'm not going to run through my entire personal history, but right. I mean, I was, by 18, I was the aquatic director of the swim program at the pool by my house. When I went to university, I was head guard after a year and then building manager. And then they approached me to be the intramural supervisor, right? This is all within my college years. In my professional career, I've been managing since around 2010. I don't remember exactly. First as a group leader and then as an engineering manager. And now I'm an area manager and I lead a 400-person organization, right? So I have a wide array of both management and then actually leadership from within. And obviously I've been leading. I've started the program way back when at Gungai Games. And that's been it's not different in terms of leadership, but it certainly has its own different perspectives. Okay. So across that, again, I gave you kind of my mini resume of sorts, right? But again, across that diverse background of roles, one thing was relatively constant in that, and that's the isolation of being either the boss, that's facing the challenges of trying to protect the job or the program up against an individual team member's or employee's desire or something like that. And you obviously face the same type of thing being a program, we'll just say program leader, like I do at Gungai Games, right? If you're the guy that TOs, actually that's better. Let's just say the TO, right? You're the TO or the program lead. Actually, I don't want to use TO because that actually carries official connotations in some cases. So I won't do that. We'll just say the fab guy, right? You're going to be the fab guy. How's that? I think that's fair. Okay. Cheers to being the fab guy. So let's think about what this isolation, this loneliness of leadership might mean in that perspective, right? First off, the easiest one is that sometimes when you're running the events, it means you're not playing in the event, right? That of itself is a very isolating thing, right? You're actually not participating with your friends, with your buddies, with the other players, right? With your community. You're not a part of it's very easy to feel like you are not a part of the community. I would argue that you still are a very important part of that community, but it's very easy to fall into that trap, right? And then of course there's the conflicts, right? This is where I'm going to go into my dad's story, right? First of all, let me set it up, right? So where I'm going with this is that oftentimes folks, especially in the world today and on the internet and stuff, folks only see what's in front of their face right there, right then and there. And it's very hard for folks to see the long-term plan, right? So here's the story, right? So where I'm a runner and where I live in my area it used to be farmland and it's being slowly developed. And when they develop a new development, they put in a sidewalk in front of that, but they're only required to put in a sidewalk as far as the front of the property, right? So on this road on which I live, coming up to my house, there's a development here, development on the other side of the road, and development on the other side of the road. Well, and this has been about 15, 20 years coming, right? So as I'm running home, the general directive is to run on the sidewalk. Well, that would require me to cross the roads back and forth. And that's obviously more dangerous than just running into traffic. I mean, not into traffic, but against traffic up the road. Now, I've had people get upset at me that I'm not running on the sidewalk. I've had people get upset that I'm running on, if I were to run on the sidewalk, then be on the other side of the road. When I've done that, I've had people upset at me. Now, I'm not taking that personally, right? But my point is, overall, I am doing the right thing. Again, in my opinion, I'm doing the right thing of minimizing the total safety risk. But what that individual sees at that point is me running on the wrong side of the road or not in the right place, and that bothers them. Now, of course, there's tons of arguments like here, well, just shut up and mind your business or whatever, right? But that's the picture I'm trying to paint here is that overall, I'm trying to do the right thing, whether you agree with it or not. I have an objective that is for the program, for the objective is trying to make it the most efficient or the best decision, or in this case, the lowest risk. And individuals respond at various data points along that journey and give their feedback. And like, well, why is this person running on that side of the road? They're an idiot. Now let's think about how that applies to what we see all the time in Flesh and Blood. I mean, how many people call LSS, the LSS is completely destroying their company? How often have we heard that in the last 5 years? Well, the scoreboard would dictate otherwise, right? So they may have to make decisions in the instant that might annoy that, like, well, why are you changing the XP? Well, we're in the midst of completely overhauling the OP program or something like that, right? I think that's a very apt analogy in this case. Okay, so with that story said, hopefully that was not too much of a waste of your time. What I'm trying to paint here is that you, again, as the leader, you might have an objective that you're trying to get to. One of the objectives that we, as store leaders, program leaders, I forget what I defined it as already, but so be it. One of the objectives that we have is navigating the very thin line between doing the best for our player base and doing the best for our community, and ensuring that our player base has a place to play. And by that, it means looking after the LGS and ensuring that the LGS has a vested interest in keeping you around, right? That is probably historically, for me, been the largest point of contention at the community at large, right? And this is where, again, one of the things I've realized in the last year or so, this is where my community, my core group of people at Gongai, I should say, right? My core folks, the ones who have been around and stick around and actually do work to help the community, this is where they've been beyond wonderful, right? We've had many discussions about, well, this is why I'm making this decision, right? I'm trying to ensure our numbers are high, or I'm trying to do this so that the store wants us to come back, or, I don't need to go into specifics, many type of things like that, right? But trying to strike a balance between, hey, let's get them out, let's get as many packs as we can get out of this event, let's do it, but making sure that it's still profitable and still in the store's best interests to do so, right? And again, you can see how to someone on the outside, that's often very conflicting. Okay, and kind of to that point, in the last year, I've absolutely run the gauntlet. As leader of the Fab program, I've run the gauntlet of all the emotions. About this time last year, so we're headed into RTN. I actually don't remember whether it was an RTN or was a ProQuest last year, but it was about this time last year. I think it was a ProQuest, actually. But it was about this time last year I ran my very first super large TCG event. Okay, so again, I gave you my management history. I'm no stranger to running large events. Well, not quite like this, but you get the idea. Okay. It was a very eye-opening scenario, and it was very much like my running down the street and people only seeing what they saw. The backlash from that from some was very negative. And I almost left the program, or I almost stepped back from the program. Now, obviously, we talked through it and we've moved on, and things have gotten better. But there's a lot of folks who don't have the community support that I had at the time, and don't have the understanding folks in the community that I had at the time, who wouldn't have that safety net, right? And it's tough. It's tough, right? And it can be very isolating, because what folks see is the output. They don't see what goes in behind it necessarily, right? And having those, so that was one learning I've had in terms of the community. And first off, I want to preface this with, you have to have an established trusting relationship with the folks in your community to be able to even have these discussions that I'm talking about, right? But sitting down with my folks and trying to explain, look, this is why I'm making this decision. Some people just will not, but you should know that person's not going to engage you, and you should just not engage them, right? As opposed to trying to make everybody like you. Sometimes you just have to accept that you're either going to have the one guy in the community who doesn't like you, or that they're probably going to leave and not come back. And that's not in any way a license to be an a-hole. That's not what I'm driving at. Sometimes I am. I completely acknowledge it that sometimes I lose my cool. We all do, right? But trying to drive towards, again, if there's a turd in the punch bowl, sometimes you got to take the turd out of the punch bowl. Right. But you don't have to do that aggressively or meanly. but you can just focus on the part of the community that you can help and is helping the community at large. Okay. And then the second part of this is something that I've never done well in my professional leadership, management, whatever, which is asking for help. And I didn't really realize the value of that from a couple perspectives until last August, when I had to leave Gongai for a period of time, right? I was traveling. I was going and teaching at university in another state for the semester. And I asked Kevin and Adam, who both agreed, to step up and help run the program while I was gone. I was still kind of doing some of the logistics and the coordination in the background, but they were physically on the ground doing the stuff. And they did a phenomenal job. But the other benefit of that, I had people I could trust and fall back on, which is very important. And sure, I had done the work to set them up for success, which of course speaks for itself. But the byproduct of that for me wasn't just that I was able to take a break and trust them. It was that they got to see the other side of the curtain, right? There were multiple incidents where they came back and they're like, wow, the amount of work that you are doing, I had no idea. And the fact that someone else can validate that for you is very, very important, right? So I didn't really realize how much of a weight it was on me to just be doing all of this stuff in the background and not having folks see it until someone actually saw it and said to me, wow. And yes, again, this is me sharing my personal experience with two very intelligent and good people who helped. But it would be the same for you, right? Maybe you do. I mean, succession planning is a thing, right? I'm not going to be alive forever. I'm not going to be playing Fab at the same vigorousness that I do forever. And having succession planning in terms of who's going to take over for you, who's taking it when I'm on vacation, stuff like that, that's something you should be doing anyway. And bringing those people in and being not your assistant, right, but being on your team in a baby leadership type role really, really helps. And that's something that if I look back at the full gauntlet of me being in charge of this program, that's something that I was not doing very well, right? And I've carried those learnings to other parts of my career as well, especially with my new role. And you'll have to ask my employees. I hope I'm doing better, right? But it's a live and learn type thing, okay? So hopefully that makes sense why I went down this path. I think the next part, or maybe the final part, hopefully, is if you are on the fence of whether or not you should do it, first off, I think it's important to know yourself and your robustness for dealing with adversity, to sound like a sports person, sports ball. But realistically, right, how just internally know yourself, how well can you deal with someone being like, well, Andrew's an a-hole because we only got 2 packs instead of 3 or something like that, right? How are you going to be able to deal with that and not go home upset and not have it live in your head for a week? It's a reasonable question to ask yourself. And I'm not saying you can't learn and you can't get better to it. But if you poop out and you're going to take it internally and it's going to ruin other parts of your life, then it's just not worth it, right? And again, earlier last year, about a year ago, I was letting it ruin my life to a certain extent, right? And I was like, I've got to leave Flesh and Blood. This is bad. That's not healthy, right? Flesh and Blood is something I love doing, and I was going to give up that because of a turd in the punch bowl, right? Or a couple turds in the punch bowl, right? So you just have to be realistic with yourself about that. It's not worth destroying your life or destroying a hobby. And like I mentioned at the very beginning of this, that is a very real barrier, I think, to people getting in. That said, I now want to flip it on you and tell you how rewarding it is, right? The folks at Gongai, again, my core team at Gongai, has really how good they make me feel maybe not how good they make me feel, but how supported I feel as a leader of that community is very rewarding, right? I'm not saying they always agree with everything I do. They probably wish more playmats were given away in faster times, which is something doing the wheel of things for playmats is something I know is a failure of mine, right? But they're patient and they remind me, and then we do it. And again, you grow together. But having that support structure has been very, very, very valuable. And again, I think it's taught me a lot about the whole situation. And I think it's taught me a lot about maybe being a better employee or be a better member of the community as well. That's what I hope. Okay. So kind of as we wrap this up, I think it's really important to understand what you're getting into, but you also need to realize, to my point of how rewarding it is, that once you get in and you get it established, if you stick with it and you're vigilant, it will be a rewarding experience. Not only will you see your work will not go unnoticed. It will not. You will make gains. Might not make them for a while, right? But eventually you being a stable person in the community who's there promoting the game that you love in a positive way will bring in people. And those people will likely be more positive than you are. And they will help grow. And then all of a sudden you've created a self-sustaining community to a certain extent. And well, that's actually it's not self-sustaining. You still have to put work into it, right? But it feels really good when it works. And again, the flesh and blood community that I am a part of has made it extremely, extremely rewarding. And the people and friendships that I've made in doing so will be with me my whole life, right? So it's been far worth the work, not necessarily some of the frustrations earlier on, but I've also learned from that and tried to move on as well. All right, so to wrap this up, let's take another cheers, folks. So if you are one of the folks out there who you're seeing a decrease in your community, or you're seeing your community maybe on a track that you want, or any other various things, right? With all this talk about fabs struggling, not getting enough new players, in your area, maybe that's true. It very well could be. No one's questioning that. But what are you doing to stop it, to help it, to turn the tide? And even though it may look like a lot of work, even though there may be a lot of headwinds, if you're positive about it and it's something you really believe in, I promise you it'll be worth it. Okay? So don't be worried about this loneliness of leadership. It will turn if you successfully put the time in and develop your community. I believe that your community will reward you in many different ways for doing it. Okay? And that doesn't mean you're not still running the tournament instead of playing in it. Sometimes it's the way it is, right? That's the job. And so know that going in, but it's worth it. I've enjoyed it. The community I have is lifelong friends. So I encourage you to at least give it a shot. Nothing else, folks. Again, cheers. Thanks for listening to my stories, and go Commando.